Hey everybody, it's Elizabeth Nader with We the People Jersey Strong. Welcome to another one of our weekly lives. If you're on now, you're probably on replay, so go ahead down below and say replay. Tell us where you're watching from. For the rest of you, as you're jumping on live, I want to remind you that We the People Jersey Strong is a bipartisan organization. We exist to encourage grassroots political involvement across the region. Our goal is to motivate, inspire, and educate you. And we're going to do that tonight. We want to get you involved. So I am honored tonight to bring to you New York State Senate candidate Ozz Sultan. Ozz, welcome
Thank
to
you.
We the People.
Hey, thank you for having me on.
Well,
Uh,
it's a pleasure to have you here, even though you're New York. And I want to explain that to everybody, Oz.
mhm.
We are a New Jersey group, but hey, listen, New York is very close and dear to our heart. And I have to tell you, in the last year or so, a lot of us have fought for the same issues.
Absolutely.
And we care what happens in New York. And, frankly, right now, we're going through a lot of the same pain. So we're really excited to get to know you better and
Mhm.
to understand, what you plan to do in your state. So Oz, let's start with your background and how you got into politics.
Sure. I've been a New Yorker, I guess, for about 17 years. The past 7 years, I've been in Harlem. I basically rebuilt from scratch the local Harlem Republican Club. I got three of us elected as district leaders. So 70, 71, 72. And then we've been working on state party. I'm now, I'm a state committee person. I'm a delegate for the state, which is just a fantastic honor. And most of what I've been working on is it's basic issues that I think that affect all of us: anti-human trafficking. How can we kind of fix policing, but with a perspective of working by, just hand in hand with cops and citizens, right? Because the defund thing we've seen doesn't work. I mean, it takes away my community police, it takes away
Yeah.
our police athletic leagues, these types of things. That doesn't solve anything. Um, and the remainder of this, it's the religious rights issues, which I think are very, very big. I work, or worked for a long period of time in interfaith. I'm actually one of the three Muslims in the United States that are recognized by the Knights Templar as a companion. And a lot of what I'm trying to do is like, look, if we can fix stuff in the Holy Land, if we can fix stuff here, we've kind of got the right opportunity to build forward. And, especially inside of the COVID era, if we're not focusing on community banking, if we're not focusing on fixing the joblessness issue by retraining, if we're not fixing on affordable housing, and that affordable housing is based upon what your area median income is. So if
Right.
your area median income, like, go to Edgewater, right? Go to Newark, go to some of these other parts in Jersey. It's not the oranges, you know.
Right. Right.
Um,
That's true.
so it's like you're going to want to have housing that fits that neighborhood. And then you were seeing the same thing in Jersey too, is that you have this. We basically have a lot of incumbent leadership that wants to push people out. But I'm like, if you keep pushing people out, what do you expect them to do? Commute an hour and a half each way just to get to work, just to do
Right.
something that's minimum wage?
Right.
This isn't tenable.
Right.
And with the major changes that we're seeing in real estate, in terms of commercial property, in terms of residential and rental properties, there has to be a big shift. And we also need technology coming in. The last couple of things I'm focused on: blockchain policy. The state of New York had a huge blockchain industry, and they decided to put this thing called the bit license in place.
Hmm.
And it's very strange to me that the guy that put the bit license in place now owns the lobbying firm that you have to apply to go
Huh.
and get the bit license.
What do you know?
Uh, so I'm a big proponent of repealing that and opening up, more business opportunity. And at the same point in time, we can bring the blockchain technology in. Everything from taxes to land deeds to home ownership, all this stuff can be tracked,
Right.
because I see this in consistent lawsuits. I mean, I had a landlord previously, 80-year-old woman that lost a building simply because somebody came out of the woodwork 5 years after she had purchased the building, claiming that they were an heir and suing for the property. So this is happening consistently here. I think it's a big opportunity for us to fix this stuff in Albany, and at the same point in time, we need fresh blood. You
Right.
know,
Right.
if you look locally, like what has been achieved, and I'm asking a lot of people, are you better off now than you were 5 years ago?
No kidding. Can you tell us a little bit about your district in detail for those of us that are
Mhm.
not familiar? It's District 30, right?
District 30 runs across the island, so across the island of Manhattan, from roughly about 96th Street, and it goes up and down a little bit. To the north, it's to 163rd Street on the one side, which is the west side of Manhattan. To the east, it's basically East Harlem, the barrio, going into Hamilton Heights, Washington Heights, Hamilton Heights, Cherry Hill, where I am, and just encompassing all of West Harlem as well. So it's geographically compared to Jersey, it's kind of a small area,
Right.
but it's about 140 city blocks, 150
Wow.
city blocks.
Wow.
So that's significant. And
What
the pop
what would you say, Oz, is you go and talk to people? What is their, I'd say, number one issue right now that they keep telling you they're frustrated about in your district?
The policing is probably one of the bigger issues. The next is joblessness and job security. What are they supposed to do next?
Right.
And beyond that, it's food insecurity.
Mm,
And that's one of the things that we want to challenge and push in Albany. I mean, like, look, new grocery stores coming in shouldn't necessarily just be Whole Foods.
right.
And that's what we have on 125th Street. And great Jeff Bezos is saying this is our first 365 store. It's our first down market store in the nation. And I'm like, well, I go in there and some of the stuff is cheap, but the
Yeah.
remainder of it is not what
Yeah.
people are purchasing at.
Right. Right.
So you need to strike some sort of balance and accord there. I think the food deserts are huge, and what we really need to focus on is that vicious cycle. Can you make enough to put food in your belly? Because
Mm,
I'll tell you what, the food in the belly problem. I've got 9 and 10-year-old kids that are joining gangs because they don't have enough to eat. We've got teenagers that get involved in the gangs, selling drugs because they don't have enough to eat.
wow.
Okay, you kind of see that this is a consistent problem.
Yeah.
And the only organizations that are actually affording us any kind of sensibility here are we've got churches, we've got mosques, we've got two synagogues up here, but you've got a lot of mosques, a lot of churches. And they provide food sustenance, they provide food programs, they provide latchkey programs, they provide after school education. There's weekend training. There's the opportunities to take tutoring classes so that you can get into college. And that's really kind of the only leg up. And if you think about this, and the administration's talked about this, the opportunity zones speak a lot to this, but I don't care what the race is. It could be black, it could be white. But when you have these disenfranchised communities, okay, and this is look, my father was in steel for 50 years. I grew up
Mm.
outside of Pittsburgh, and I grew up touring. Like I mean, the first videos that I had weren't like children's videos. We had like mine safety explosion videos.
Yeah.
Like, this is how you prevent a coke explosion, and that's
Right.
heat vitrified coal, right?
Right.
So I'm like growing up, with this VCR watching these things. Um, and my dad took me to a couple of mills and things like that. And there's this ethos of America where people were proud of what they did,
Yes.
and that's been lost.
Yes.
And if you look at like just the people around here, they want to have something that they're proud to do. They're
Right.
proud to say they do. They want to build their families. They want to have reasonable access to education. They want to have reasonable access to stepping their kids forward. And I know you've got this in southern Jersey. Okay, I don't think this is a northern Jersey problem, but like in agrarian New Jersey, right? I think a lot of people don't realize this. Like you go down towards Philly, I mean, it's farmland, and
That's
it is
right.
like south of Rumson. It's a lot of farmland down
That's
there.
right.
But it's identical problems. It's people selling onerous trailer mortgages at 24%.
Mm,
It's banks not wanting to give people loans. It's lack of access to fresh water, lack of access to. I mean, they're growing their own food, but lack of access to a lot of other goods and
right.
basic services.
Right.
These kind of problems can be solved if we can figure out the policy here. And a lot of what I want to do is look at Harlem as kind of an innovation incubator. Like I spent a bunch of years working at Carnegie. I was at Carnegie Mellon. We did like tech transfer studies. We did studies of like what makes a community successful. I've done that, working with CUNY and some HBCUs in terms of what we can do to kind of like build local economies. I sit on a bunch of boards, so I should mention that. So I'm on the board of
Yeah.
the Homeland Security Foundation of America. What we're focused on is how can we prevent active shooters in schools.
Wow,
Okay.
that's awesome.
Yeah, and that's some of the training I'm trying to bring up here. One of the other things I'm looking at doing is National African American Gun Owners Association, which is
Mhm.
kind of like a sister to the NRA. Like, let's bring them up here and let's talk about gun safety classes.
Yeah,
You want to talk
absolutely.
about these issues, like let's say, okay, well, there's safe gun ownership, and then there's the illegal gun ownership issue, and that also allows me to educate people, because then I can say, look, we understand the illegal ownership issue. We understand the fact that a 1-year-old was shot and killed by an illegal gun in Brooklyn just over the weekend. We understand
Yeah.
that a dad was walking with a 6-year-old in the Bronx and was shot and killed last weekend by an illegal gun. So we have to be able to separate these issues, and then as a community start working better.
Well,
Um,
I think you bring up these recent events that are so heartbreaking. And I have to tell you, we're sitting here in New Jersey watching New York City just really, I don't know, it's turning into something that we don't recognize. Will you opine a little bit on the handling of everything related to COVID with both your governor and your mayor? Because, we are very concerned about the future of our state. We are as equally concerned about the future of New York City. So tell us how you feel about all of that and how it's heightened some of these issues.
I'm happy to talk to any New Jersey legislator, or anyone who's pushing policy down there. So the first thing Cuomo did was, and this was horrific, was he decided that they were going to take COVID patients and put them into nursing care homes.
Yeah.
And so what they did was, you ended up with mass kills, and he effectively wrote an executive order indemnifying the executives of any of these nursing homes from putting these folks in there. The second thing that we had a boat here that was supposed to take
Right.
all of the non-COVID cases.
Right.
Well, then what we find out is that De Blasio, just to basically burn Trump, purposely didn't send people there, and we've got overflows inside of a multitude of hospitals. Um, I've had a couple of colleagues that were working in the Javits Center, pretty much round the clock. I mean, they're running shifts, and it wasn't a pretty sight. The Janaza Project, which is a Muslim funeral project, as well as to the Catholic charities that I've talked to, and I've talked to a couple of the Protestant charities, they were receiving freezer trucks full of dead bodies,
Oh my,
stacked like cords of wood.
oh my
Okay,
gosh.
this is how bad it was up here. And De Blasio was super cavalier about it. And we don't know enough about this virus. Okay, we
Right.
don't know, is it the heat that's pushing it away? But we do know that we had certain spikes, and we do
Yeah.
know that you had the Memorial Day spike, and now you're getting the protest spike. But we don't really have a lot more information than that. The news hasn't been very helpful
No.
inside of this, but from the administration's perspective of the governor and the mayor, it's been an absolute failure. It's
Yeah.
been an absolute failure to launch, an absolute failure to manage, and an absolute failure to really maintain the populace. And so, we've got masks and sanitizer that's produced in prisons, and a few other products that are coming out right now. But at the end of the day, what it comes down to is that, like, they're not necessarily prepared for another spike.
Right.
And I am doing my work these days is, I do blockchain work. I do work inside of the PP industry, trying to help some folks out. And we're also trying to put blockchain on the PPE so you can verify that it's real, because we've
Mhm.
done a bunch of work with Texas. 70% of the product they were receiving was fake.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Horrible.
like fake luxury products. We're talking about fake masks. So
Wow.
instead of being like a 4-ply or a 5-ply, it doesn't even pass. You could like blow through it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
So Oz, let me ask you this. If you were to step into de Blasio's shoes right now or the governor's shoes, what would you do immediately to start to turn this around? Because it just feels like it's out of control. And you add all of these issues to the defund police and the protests and really all of the police that have been taken out of the rotation in New York City, the plain clothes. What would you do? I mean, it's a lot of problems to solve. If you had to step into their shoes right now, what would you do first?
the first thing to fix is the crime units. You got to put the crime units back. And people didn't understand what the crime units did. They basically just went to take illegal guns off of the streets, and that's
Mm,
hard work. That is not necessarily the most pleasant work.
right.
Okay. The second thing I would look at is that we have to fix the community policing issue by basically revamping. Like, look, when this worked in the 80s, when this worked a little bit into the 90s, we actually had chiefs that would do 4 days on, 3 days off. They were getting paid, but 3 days they just walked the community. Okay. And they did this with all the community affairs officers, and they got to know everybody. Stop and frisk, a lot of these other things. This is going back to like LBJ tactics,
Right.
like,
Right.
let's treat them like animals type
Mhm.
thing. And that kind of stuff has to stop. But the I think the second thing, the second premise of what we would do in the city is that we actually have to start fixing some of the basic services. Okay, I think it's great that Gail Brewer has done work with, you know, some of the food organizations to bring stuff in. But I'm telling you, people don't have enough money to afford food, and people have a certain degree of respect and esteem where they're not necessarily going to tell you like how much they are suffering. Okay,
Right.
and that needs to be solved with a food program that kind of comes from the state, at least as a stopgap. Okay, but the real fix is going to come in terms of getting people employed.
Right.
And
Right.
look, everything's moving to mobile work. This is going to afford people a lot more opportunities. You don't have to wear a suit. You could wear something casual in a
Right.
lot of these
Right.
settings.
Right.
And I think that, look, technical trade, tech trade. If you look at my website, ozforny.com, that's OZFORNY.com, but the number 41 sends you there too.
Right.
You know, it's I've talked about some of these things. Like Google's talking about putting $175 million into this kind of training. Great. How do we get this into our communities? Because I'll tell you this, every single time we've seen this for the past 30 years, large corporations doing that. I'm like, I don't see it here. And I'll
Right.
tell you, I have not seen it in Harlem. I lived in Albany. I didn't see it in Albany. I lived in Pittsburgh. I didn't see it there. I lived in California. I didn't see it there. I was in Texas. I didn't see it there. So,
Mm.
who holds these people accountable?
Right.
But
Right.
but really the last leg of this becomes changes, absolute manifest changes to policies that help our communities. Okay, you know, there's a lot of liberal social issues these have already been decided. All right,
Mm.
but protection of religious communities, protection of religious rights. I'll, you know, one that I know is near and dear to your heart, the religious exception to vaccines.
Right.
I, the point that I make inside of my community, and I hear from my community a lot, is the Tuskegee Airmen. You know,
Mm.
they were experimented upon with syphilis,
That's
right?
right. That's right.
And and not to say that it's anything of that nature, but you know, when you have Bill Gates and a bunch of other people taking a process that normally takes 7 years
That's
to get
right.
to get to human trials inside of any vaccine, it's 7 years, and they're literally, what are you testing in 6 months? And
That's
when I know that we had 5 strains of COVID in New York and multiple mutations, you know, there's no guarantee that having had COVID gives you immunity.
right.
Whereas we know that this vaccine is by no means a guarantee, but they're talking about mandates now. Okay, and I will give you two examples. The cervical cancer vaccine
Right.
that was given, and we've seen that there have been some very, very violent reactions with some young women
Death.
who have died.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, from a religious exemption perspective, you should have that right. Now,
Hmm.
and I'm willing to push legislation inside of Albany against that. And we had other Republicans who I won't mention, but that voted for that. Okay, and what that did for us up here was that you had thousands upon thousands of mothers that were expecting to enroll their kids that found out they couldn't enroll their kids, that had to switch over to homeschooling. And
Right.
this was a year before.
Yeah.
Okay, and now inside of the era of COVID, where they don't know if they're going to open or this or that or what they're going to do, they're putting these mandates. You may end up with restrictions upon you by the state if you don't do it, but I think you should have the right to basically make religious decisions.
Well,
Okay.
you guys lost. So, you know, we watched New York and we tried to help and we watched you lose your rights. And
Mhm.
then it's just going across the country. We were blessed in New Jersey to hold it off in January. But we all are, we know what the setup is and we know what's coming.
Yeah,
And so for them to put a vaccine forward that they've tested in what amount of time, and see, that's who we're talking about right there, the kids.
yeah,
So the medical freedom issues, which really go right into the religious freedom issues, which then go right into the family issues. I know you're big about family issues.
mhm,
What are the, you've mentioned food, which is a huge thing, and access to good food that isn't
yeah.
super expensive.
Good, clean, healthy food,
Right.
lean meat, not highly processed stuff.
Right.
And then sometimes it's food education.
Yes.
Okay, because like what people forget is that the impoverished in this country have spent probably 4 to 5 decades living on hot dogs and government cheese.
Right.
And outside of government cheese making probably the best grilled cheese out there, there's not a lot of saving graces to it.
Not good for you. No,
No.
not good for you. Yeah. Yeah. And then we're causing health issues. And then it's just this whole, the community just continues to, not be able to rise above that. What are you
Mhm.
saying? I'm wondering about small businesses in your district because they have been so
Gone.
hurt in Jersey by the decisions of
50%.
the governor.
50% are not coming back. Okay. The
50?
ones, the 50.
Oh my
The
gosh.
the ones that are staying is I will tell you, the bodegas are staying because people can finance a sandwich till tomorrow, and I have seen
Yeah.
this in front of my eyes, and you know this from some of the poorer communities in Jersey that kind of stuff
Mhm.
happens too.
Yeah.
Okay, and we have a lot of love for Jersey too. You know, you guys are kind of like our sister state.
Right.
Half of us, half of our people have our cars plated over there.
Right.
Um,
That's true. That's true. Sorry. Well, you got to lower your taxes. I don't know what to tell you.
No, I'm not saying, but you guys have that the school tax. Really, yours is the housing tax. But I'll
Yeah.
tell you what they snuck by and no one is paying any attention to is that my housing tax, and I rent, and we're looking to buy next year, but my housing taxes, were I to be a property owner here, went up 2.1%. Okay, and the question that you have to say is when there's no school, when there's no this, when
What are we
there's no
paying
that,
for? What are we paying for?
what services are you paying
No
for?
police? I mean, not really, but
You're paying
right?
for debt servicing. That's
Yep,
what you're paying for.
that's
You're paying
right.
for debt servicing on the city. And like, look, I'm not a monster, but I do have to say that when Zerlina Maxwell came in with the DNC and we had a DNC RNC thing inside of the Apollo Theater, and she starts talking about illegal immigrants, you had an entire 5,000 people, okay, of mostly Latino and Black booing her. And the
Mm,
reason for that is that there has to be a balance in between this want to give illegal immigrants everything, but I have a single mother, I have a small family, and they can't get basic subsidies, they can't get housing, they can't get
right,
Section 8 housing, they can't get food subsidies, and they can't get healthcare subsidies. But someone who, and these are people who have been here for generations, okay, in many cases, but someone who's come here illegally gets all of that, boom.
right.
It,
We
it,
have problems with that.
it's
Yeah,
insane. It's not just unfair, it's unbalanced policy, and that's what the mayor has spent a lot of money on. And
right,
so if I can make my way to Albany, a lot of what I'm going to say is that, like, look, yeah, we got to sort the DACA stuff out, and we got to sort out a lot of the immigration issues, and there should be a legal path to citizenship. I believe in that. Why?
okay.
Because if you're going to come here, you're going to pay your taxes, and you're going to put your, I mean, my dad had to be sponsored by a corporation. We had to put up a $50,000 bond for every single one of my extended family that immigrated here.
Yeah.
Okay, but apparently all of that's gone out the window.
Yes, it has.
Um,
Right,
but if we're gonna make this fair, you have to level the playing field. And if you're going to provide those for people who aren't citizens, it had better at least at a baseline be provided for people who are citizens, who are earning underneath a threshold. And mark my words, if we don't have a revamp of technology through opportunity zones, which you're going to get in Jersey, we're going to get here, we're going to get a few more of these things. We need tech training, we need trade technology, we need light manufacturing. We have tons of these jobs out there. The problem is that getting people through somewhere from 6 to 12 months worth of training while they're doing a job and while they're doing all these other things, and supporting families in many cases. And think about this, in many single mother households, the young man feels that he has this role, he
right,
has this wage earner role. And think about how many households in New Jersey have that same scenario happening, where the kid is like, 16, 17, but seeing a much major role that they have to take on in terms of the relationship and responsibilities they have, not just to their family, but maybe even extended family members. Grandma ends up staying on the sofa because grandma can't go into an old folks home and you can't afford it anymore.
right.
All of these things are going to be the next 5 years.
Mm,
Okay, this is the America that we're walking into. And we're going to need federal help. And I see that coming.
yeah.
I see additional help coming. I see additional PPP loans coming. I was on a White House call a couple of weeks ago, and they're talking about authorizing another 30 billion, but
In what, PPP or in stimulus
in
checks?
PPP. So they're talking about to smaller communities, another 30 billion in PPP. But I think what we're going to have is a mixture of that, stim checks, and then $1,200 only does so much for so many people. I mean, $1,200 is barely someone's rent.
Right,
Uh,
especially in
if
New
you live
York.
in the
Yeah,
city,
and especially in New York. You had called yourself, I believe you said, a reform Republican.
that's correct.
Can you
Uh,
explain what that means?
Well, it's basically this. I'm very states' rights. I'm very pro the Constitution. I'm a believer in the rights of religious freedom. I think that if you are going to sit there and extol the virtues of LGBTQIA rights, you should also extol the virtues of religious rights. Both of them should coexist. Okay,
Mm,
one does not supersede the other.
right.
One does not get to tell the other one what to do.
Mm,
But at the same point in time, we have to fix a lot of our policies. Okay. I think a lot of our policies don't account for COVID, they don't account for poverty. And really, it's simple stuff: job, education, training, community banking, reform the child care services programs. Okay. Because guess what COVID did? It wiped out parents. So you telling me that these kids are just disappearing in a system? What if I want to adopt these kids? What if
right.
my neighbor wants to adopt these kids? What if they can be in a household that actually is going to love and care about them?
Mm,
The opportunities for these types of things should be there. The medical exclusions that you're talking about should be on the table. And at the same point in time, community banking and a focus on fixing the police that fixes it from the perspective of community. Look,
mm,
back the blue in us too. Okay, that's my line.
mm.
You got to support both. Okay,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
just can't be one or the other. Because this is where we consistently have these head butting arguments in America, and it doesn't solve anything. If
Right.
you have to be solutions orientated, and as a reform Republican, that's where I come from. I'm 100% solutions orientated.
And you also talked about building an alliance between Muslims and Christians. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Hold on one second. Kiddo is. Can you hear that?
Nope, can't hear it. It's
Okay,
okay.
good. One of the biggest things I've been looking at is that Muslims and Jews have always done interfaith. That's been going on for like 100 years. But one of the biggest things is that Mary is mentioned in the Quran more times than in the Bible, right?
Mm,
And there's all these, and we both believe in the second coming of Christ,
mhm.
and there's a lot of similarities. But at the end of the day, when you talk about persecution, I mean, I am just absolutely appalled at the knocking down. Like, I look, regardless of how you feel about Catholics, you don't knock down statues of saints.
Right.
You don't knock down Jesus and Virgin Mary. You don't do these things.
Right.
Okay. If you're going to say that you respect these people over here that are secular, you respect these people over here that are religious. That has to be a baseline of just your ethos,
Mm,
your fabric of sensibility, your morality. Okay, and one of the biggest things I want to see, and this is where I've been working with the Templars a bit, and a lot of them are in Jersey, right? A lot of them are closer to Red Bank. Um, but the perspective I have is if we can get people to understand the similarities of faith and the need for our rights and our privileges and our expectations and our holidays. Okay, I went to Duquesne University undergrad before they phased out my B school and I had to transfer. But we would have every pretty much Monday or Friday off for some saints holiday. Uh,
right.
Starting in this is Catholic, right?
Yeah.
But you need to afford people the right to their faith. You need to afford people the right to their belief. This is all afforded in the Constitution.
Yep.
And if we as Christians and Muslims can work together to get people to understand that, we become a line of defense. And that line
Yeah.
of defense is to say that, like, religion's cool and groovy, being secular is cool and groovy, but you can't just say being secular only. Okay, you can't just sit here and demonize us just for existing.
Yep.
Um, and th-
Absolutely.
and I think that's really kind of the way forward, because we basically protect the rights of religious communities to exist and build. In many cases where people don't pay attention, the churches, the mosques, the synagogues, they're the ones with the after school programs, the latchkey programs, the preschool food programs, all
Yep.
of these other things. And I know in my community in Harlem, Washington Heights, Hamilton Heights, I mean, Edgewater, New Jersey, if you go to even outside of the Oranges, right? Go to Newark, go to a bunch of other places, Camden, right? You have religious communities that are really providing the heavy lift where the state fails, where nonprofits fail,
Yeah.
um, and that's something that we have to really kind of like support and help shine.
Yeah, absolutely. The faith community will catch someone right before, they fall. I mean, we need them to be there. Now, you mentioned something else to me that I would like you to kind of, before you sort of tell people how to find more about you and all of that, you mentioned about history repeating itself. And I think that
Absolutely.
a lot of us are very concerned about that, the fact that we're erasing history. Can you kind of talk about your view on that? Because I think it's really important.
You have the American flag behind you, okay? And that's the one that we've had since 1948, when we added 2 stars for Alaska and Hawaii.
Right,
And a lot of people don't know that.
right.
But what you need to think about is this: we have a painful history in this country of relations with many, many groups of people,
Yep,
not just black,
right.
not just Jewish,
Absolutely.
not just Latino,
Right.
the Irish, the
Japanese.
Italians,
Yep.
the Chinese, the
Mhm.
Japanese,
Yep.
we get the Native Americans.
Yeah.
Okay, I can go on and on and on. But if we are willing to erase this history in order to just be nice to each other, you learn nothing.
Mm.
Okay, and what you see, and I see this consistently with Antifa. Look, Antifa has all of these, one, not black, two, completely Marxist BLM organizers
Mm.
that keep getting themselves arrested. You look
Right.
at Portland, Oregon, there's over 200 BLM arrests. Not one of these people is black. Not one of these people is standing up for the rights of black people. And all you keep doing is giving people murals. I'm like, where is the opportunity for jobs for black people?
Right.
Where's the opportunity for education? Where's all these other opportunities? And trust me, like, this is the same thing that happens in rural and poor white America that no one wants to pay any attention to because they've demonized them. But my
Right.
thought process is, if you can educate people to even understand things, like, look, the Civil Rights Act that was passed in 1968, do you know they put a sunset clause in that thing and it had to be revoted in 2008? And it
Wow.
passed unanimously, but they put a sunset clause on it. That this is how they were thinking. This is what
Mm.
LBJ was thinking about. So knowing these types of things helps people understand that the political depravity is something that has happened. It
Right.
lets them understand the nature of people, okay? Because a lot of people like to think that they're really nice to each other and everyone can be nice while they're drinking their $7 latte. But
Mm.
they don't understand sweatshops, they don't understand suffrage, they don't understand poverty. And a lot of people talk about poverty, but these are the same people that just want to come to Harlem and feed a kid for a day. I got 364 days there. That kid's got
Right.
to worry about eating.
Right.
And
Right.
this is I would say 50% of America is going to have these issues.
Yep.
And as a reform Republican, it is the perspective of us to basically take the helm. Like, look, we're launching something called the Harlem Agenda, and it looks identical to the policies that you're going to find on my campaign page, with a little more and a little further articulation there. But all we're talking about is that if I can fix the financing of the neighborhood with community banks, if I can figure out how to get stuff structured with muni bonds and like other financial instruments that no one seems to know about inside of poor white and poor black areas, no one
Mm.
knows this stuff exists, right?
Mm.
And then on top of that, we're able to give people the opportunity to learn. And look, you've got 5 frontiers. You've got emerging technology, which is managed hosting, cybersecurity, these types of things. You've got blockchain and digital ledger technology and cryptocurrency that I've done a lot of work in. You've got hemp and cannabis, because guess what? This stuff's legal in cannabis 8 states, hemp 28 states. But you can make biodiesel out of hemp. You can make
Right.
everything that you can make out of petrochemicals out of hemp.
Right.
Henry Ford had said that if you can grow yourself an acre of hemp, you can make yourself gasoline to run your car. And
Mm.
this is all accurate.
Mm.
And then the last two are advanced robotics and AI, and then manufacturing. Manufacturing is coming back to America in a big way because guess
Yes.
what? When COVID round two and COVID round three comes out, okay, because it's going to happen, are you going to trust this Chinese supply chain?
No.
Or are you going to trust a supply chain that maybe has a blockchain or something on the back of it that can tell you where it was manufactured, where it was touched, what people touched it when? Oh,
Right.
and by the way, it doesn't have slave labor.
Right. By the
And,
way.
and there
Right.
was an executive order yesterday, and this affected the PPE industry. Trump said, "Yeah, we got to stop one of the largest importers of gloves because there's a large risk, and we have a lot of evidence they're using slave labor." And this is
Unbelievable.
this is in Malaysia.
Yeah. Unbelievable. This is unbelievable. Well, listen, I love your ideas, and it's so great for us to hear from a neighbor like this who is committed to making the change. You have a lot of work to do in front of you,
Yeah.
but it sounds like you have the ideas to make it happen. Will you share with people how they can get involved in your campaign, find out more about you? You shared the website
Mhm.
before, but do that again, Oz.
Sure. It's ozforny.com. That's ozforny.com. You can send an email to info@ozforny.com. You can catch me on Twitter at Sultan. Um, I'm pretty much on every single social media platform out there, with the exception of TikTok and Snapchat, because there's really no time for that.
Right.
Um, I'll be on Varney tomorrow at 9:45 a.m. talking about this Twitter hack. Like, look, come up to Harlem. I'll have a coffee with you.
That's
But
awesome.
but but I'm looking for like-minded folks. We could use a couple bucks of donations. I have to say that my campaign manager will yell at me, but I'm
Right.
not looking for a lot of money. I'm not looking to raise tens of thousands of bucks. I'm saying, like, look, if I can raise, well, actually hundreds of thousands, I'm not looking to raise. If I can raise tens of thousands of bucks, I can make a lot of change here.
Yeah.
And a lot of what we're trying to do is we're going to work with a nonprofit. We're just testing out a lot of the stuff for food insecurity. We're testing out a lot of these things right now. I
Yeah.
have plans to bring in, programs to push back on the gun violence. We're already starting to talk to the police and focus grouping on, like, what if we could do safe gun ownership, get everyone in the community engaged, and then bring, they were called like police watch back. But these are people that now all of a sudden they're block captains. They have relationships. The cops come
Right.
like, no, he's cool.
Right.
Okay, well, let's sit down and have a
They
conversation.
know each other. They
Yeah,
know each other. It,
this is what we need to get back to.
yeah, you know what? You need to get to know your neighbors, and you clearly care about your community. You're clearly very involved and very committed to them. And I honor you for doing that, because
Thank
that's
you.
the kind of politician that we need, that actually cares about who lives next door to him. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing all these amazing ideas and
Hey, thank
insight.
you for
And
having me.
we wish you well, Oz.
Hey, this has been fantastic. New Jersey, stay strong as you always do,
We will.
and hope to catch up with you again.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Oz. Best of luck to you.
Thanks. Bye.